Trowbridge with Trowbridge Law Group, TLG, and we're a law firm that works with raising money, private placements, Regulation D, Regulation A+, regulation crowdfunding, all sorts of securities offerings that we write the documents for. If you have any questions about that, be sure to contact us. Today's podcast really follows up on the one I did the last time. It's standalone, but I'm building an example, and it's called, Is This Fraud? And it's really builds on the issue, the discussion of what is on your investment, and might that be different than the distribution you get. So once again, I've got some numbers. Let's see what the numbers are, just in case you missed last time. In a syndication, our example is that we raise $1 million and we promise the investors 10%. So that would be $100,000 at the end of the year. The property produces $200,000 of income. We have $45,000 of expenses, $55,000 of debt service. So there's $100,000 in the bank at the end of the year. Perfect. We can distribute that. That's a distribution of 10%. Where did it come from? It came from the earnings of the property. It is totally a return on your $1 million invested in the property. Perfect. But here's the other example. Same property, $1 million invested, a promise of a 10% cash distribution. The property produces $200,000, but this year the operating expenses go up $55,000. Debt service stays the same, $55,000. So now at the end of the year, we have $90,000 in the bank. Sponsor wants to make a distribution of 10%. Sponsor sends you $100,000. $90,000 came from operating the property. That clearly is a return on your investment. But the question is, where did the other $10,000 come from? The distribution is 10%. 9% is return on. The extra $10,000 must be something else. And that's the question. Where does the other $10,000 come from? And here's some examples I've seen. First of all, the sponsor might use reserves to make the distribution. Well, what do you mean by that? Maybe the sponsor set aside money when he raised money to do improvements on the property, capital expenditures. And when we're short $10,000 of the distribution, we reach into that reserve account and take $10,000 and put it with the 90 and send it to the investors so they get their 10%. Oh, what's the motivation? The motivation is the sponsor wants to make good on their promise of a 10% distribution. But their projection, it wasn't a promise, their projection was that would come from the operations of the property. Well, it didn't, did it? In our example, 90,000 came from the operation and 10 came from somewhere else. One of the places might be reserved. Here's another one. Maybe the sponsor draws down on reserves set aside for a rainy day. Maybe it wasn't for capital expenditure. It wasn't anything. It was just simply a reserve. And they told you it was a reserve. But a reserve for a rainy day, does that really equate to a reserve for making a cash distribution if you're short? I don't know. I'd have to read the document pretty carefully, but that's what I see, and that can be problems. More problematic is that the sponsor might have other plans. We've seen sponsors raise extra money up front. Maybe they only needed $900,000 to do the deal, but they raised $1 million. So they'd have $1 million in the bank, and every quarter they'd send you part of that $100,000, especially in a value add property where there's no income at all. How can they promise a cash distribution based on return when they're telling you that for the first 2 years, there's no distribution because we're renovating all the units? That's got to be a red flag to you. Distributions come from earnings on the property. If they're raising money from you ahead of time and just sending you your money back, they better not call that a yield. They better not call that return on. It's return of, because it's your own money. And if they report that that's what your property is earning, that's a fraudulent statement. No question about that. Or the last one we saw last week was some sponsors sell new investments to new members to bring in new cash. And what do they do with that new cash? They don't renovate the property. They don't do anything. They use that new cash to send distributions to the investors. Okay, that is a Ponzi scheme. And in the situation we were advised of, the sponsor says, well, no, that's okay, because I told the investors ahead of time that if we run into distribution problems, I could sell new investments. What happens when you sell new investments? Everyone's ownership gets depleted, right? I'm going to sell new investments to people, and I'm going to take that cash and I'm going to pay you the return on distribution you want to have. No. That's fraudulent. That's a Ponzi scheme. And the answer is yes, but I put it in the PPM, I put it in the operating agreement, and all the investors agreed to it. One of the very first things you learn in contract law, which is an operating agreement, is a contract, that illegal provisions in a contract are not enforceable. They're just simply illegal. So whether the investors knew what they were signing or not doesn't make any difference. In this case, that is an illegal clause and should be stricken, and would be stricken from the contract in the court of law, and the sponsor would have to answer to what they did. So either of these plans are at the least misrepresentations of what is going on in the offering, and at the most part fraudulent. So what I suggest every passive investor do is look at the income statement that the sponsor sends you quarterly, half yearly, or annually, and look at how much money the property made. Income minus expenses minus debt service. And then see how much they sent. If they're sending out more than the property made, something like this or something else is happening, and you need to challenge the sponsor on that immediately. So that's my Facebook post for today, and I don't mean to scare anyone, but if you have any questions, call me, 949-570-1507. You can reach me by email, gene@Trowbridge.com. Our website, it's Gene@TrowbridgeLawGroup.com, Gene@TrowbridgeLawGroup.com. Our website, TrowbridgeLawGroup.com, go to our YouTube channel. We have all sorts of interesting things in our YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel is Trowbridge, YouTube/Trowbridge Law. Let me do that again. Our YouTube channel is YouTube/Trowbridge Law. That's it for today. We'll see you next time on the next Trowbridge Law Group Facebook post. Thank you.